Hey, 2 in 2 days. So today's thought processes have just been a lot of trying to figure out what the output of this is now. Much what like I was saying yesterday, where the difference between these two rambles is that today is much more focused on the output and less just guessing at what I'm talking about at all, really. My current thinking is it's all based on trying to get this desk space now. My current thinking is an examination of media theory and using a lot of previous writing on this very topic that relates specifically to old media theory applied to new media, but taking it further and tracking how previous theorists have dealt with this through technological shifts and through format shifts, and then expanding on that work into the contemporary space and dealing with brand new media and in specific social forms of media. There's kind of two angles to that. There's the the actual idea of the social interconnectedness in media, which I'm sure there's a lot of writing on already, starting with things like YouTube and going on from there. So I'm hoping to be able to draw from a lot of other research on that area, but also on the actual shifting ontological format, the actual shape of the frame and the devices used for viewing it and the place it is that these new platforms exist within our life. So I'm thinking very specifically in terms of app-based media that stay moving image. So things like TikTok and Instagram stories, particularly, would be where I would want to look here. They inhabit very different spaces in our lives to any other form of media, really any other moving image media, up to a point. It's clearest to see in terms of just the shape it is. From cinema right through to YouTube, we've had landscape video, landscape moving image. And these newer platforms actually are taking us portrait for arguably the first time. There are a couple of exceptions here and there because clearly cameras can move and be put on their sides, but as a predominant format for the I need another word for format, as a predominant format on a format on the platform. It's new. I can't think of another example of a media type that has consistently shown us moving image in that particular frame. Still image has had its place historically for a long time, just flipping between landscape and portrait as artistic needs must, or as framing needs must in some cases. But moving image has that traditional landscape appearance, which is now changing slightly. So can older theories on moving image on cinema still be relevant to a format which is intrinsically different just from its very appearance, from the shape of the screen we're viewing it on? That is a big change. So the output I'm hoping to achieve is a discussion on how useful old media theories are in not just evaluating new media in terms of previous discussions on this, but also in terms of contemporary media and emerging platforms. The key thing I want to achieve with this is some sort of future proofing where I can come up with a model for how to apply a theory, a historic theory for moving image. I'm going to keep it that specific. I'm not just going to go media in general, but how do we apply a theory for moving image that is as old as cinema to any platform, even if it is not yet existing? I would like to create some sort of framework out the back of this, a theoretical framework where a future scholar can use that framework and apply it to a new moving image media that has emerged at the time, whatever that looks like. There are challenges and there are exciting things to talk about. I've already mentioned the social aspect of video now on these newer platforms. That would be one example of where someone writing about cinema probably would not have been able to even begin guessing at what video now includes. And that is not really something that is built into the moving image part of it, but it is a large part of why that particular form of media exists and how it's consumed. Um, Speaking of consumption, there is also an area to make sure I talk about quite a lot, and that's the blending between producer and consumer, which is more and more enabled by video platforms as they emerge. Really, we've gone from cinema to TV to video, pre-recorded content, and arguably easy to manipulate video in an analog sense, to digital video with non-linear editing, to YouTube with its sharing capabilities and rapid turnaround times for creating content in response, to something like TikTok, which I keep coming back to, and I need to make sure I've got more examples than just TikTok, but that really opens it out into a handheld format that anyone can consume. All you need is the app, and all the tools are in there ready for you to go. YouTube still requires you to have access to things that, I mean, it's becoming easier now. Laptops have webcams, for example, but top content creators on YouTube are still going to probably use a separate camera, lighting setups, decent backgrounds, maybe green screen. They have access to editing software that allows them a certain level of control over the product that they're creating. It's highly unlikely that your top YouTube content producers are just sitting in front of a webcam and using a very basic editing platform. That's not to say they don't exist, but it's much more likely that those content creators that have that level of engagement with media production, or that lack of a level of engagement with media production, they are content producers you probably would encounter on something like TikTok, where it's all built into the app. And that movement from well, it's gatekeeping, that gatekeeping price tag that's moved throughout history and technology from cinema with its high cost attached to production, to now it's just in your hand when you fancy it, when you've got something to say, or you've got nothing to say and you still want to say something. That is a huge, huge shift in terms of moving image media, and something very important to talk about. So that brings me on to a couple of theorists that I would like to use lenses of. So not the theories in particular that I want to study and say this has existed in cinema, can we trace that through the developments of technology? But actually, there are a few theorists that I would like to talk about throughout the work, to view these other theories through the eyes of, essentially. When we're talking about convergence, so I would like to talk about Jenkins a little bit there, and that's quite an easy read, so I'm looking forward to that one. It's not a hugely academic text. But also the idea of media carrying a message, which is arguably how I got started with this whole idea. I was talking about language on YouTube. So I will be drawing on McLuhan quite a lot, and that is a fairly difficult read. It's so tangential, it goes all over the place. It's very hard to find a thread. And there are a few others that I would like to get around to, and their names escape me right now because I have not made adequate notes ahead of this particular video, but they are backed up on Evernote, so that's fine. So I'll be going quite thoroughly through a literature review of where we stand, first of all, in terms of how direct a message are we able to send through moving image media, what work has been done in terms of what theories carry through and are able to be applied to new forms of media, what writing is available that is completely already about this subject, and what am I going to be adding to that. And hopefully what I'm going to be adding to that is just a super contemporary epilogue, essentially, to pre-existing work, after thorough analysis and checking. A large part of this really feels like it needs to be approached like a scientific method. It needs to be very much about theory, prediction, and experiment. It's going to be quite tricky to do in this area, but I feel confident that actually there is such a wealth of writing before the contemporary end of this that I'm able to not just analyze people's predictions and see where they came, what came of them. But I'm able to repeat that over particular instances of moving image history. I'm able to see writing from a certain era before something like DVD comes along, and then I'm able to retrospectively look at what happened after DVD and if the things that those writings were saying came true at all. But then that's still a secluded piece of history, and there's then going to be other analysis on that very subject and other people talking about that. So I get to follow this pattern. I get to see what other people have done in this regard and just add on to that, which I think is going to be very helpful. So my output is quite clear to me now. It's about creating a model of utilizing existing theory and preempting how a theory can be applied to emerging technologies for moving image. One key thing I'm going to make sure I do talk about is the idea of separating technology from moving image message, just to make sure well, I'm clear on that point. I'm clear in my stance on whether or not the technology, as it became available, has driven the content forms, or if it's likely that actually societal shifts have informed the technology and enabled its propagation. I feel a little bit in the middle of that at the moment. I'm crystallizing a stance, which I shall eventually declare, I'm sure. But as of yet, it feels somewhere in the middle. I do feel a little like society has wanted technologies and has had artistic abilities latent within them that technologies have merely enabled. But there are things to be said, especially about the early stages of cinema, that no one was really doing anything until the technology came along. Moving image didn't exist before moving image, and you can't really argue that it's because of a lack of trying. Who was trying right up until the late 18th century? Sure, you can talk about your zoetropes, and you can talk a little bit about the persistence of vision. It doesn't go back that far, though. So there is something absolutely to be said about a technology becoming available. An art form will be born of that technology, and that is going to inform a large part of the discussion, I think, in this thesis I'll be working on. So when I come to a framework in the end about how you can talk about existing theories for an emerging technology, it needs to be very clear as to whether it's saying you're going to have to sit and wait for new technology to come along before you're going to have something to talk about, or you're going to be able to use this set of theories to preempt a technology, to talk about a potential media form in the future, and just hope that someday some technology comes along that enables it in some way similar to the vision you had. That is quite a moot point, now that I've babbled it out. It's maybe not that useful to the discussion, but it is still important that I have at least a stance on that. I think it's an inevitable part of the conversation that I'm going to have to at least address and say I'm aware of it. So I am rambling quite a lot now. I've talked about output. That is the one thing I wanted to nail down a bit. I wanted to make sure I've got that in my head. Going forward is now lots of reading, lots of checking on that as a viable output, and finding previous work that is essentially done the same. I'm sure there's a lot. I need to find my niche now. Cool. All right. Catch you later.